He was my everything: husband, best friend, soulmate. We built a life filled with trust, laughter, and dreams. But when my childhood best friend lost her apartment and moved into our home, cracks began to show. What started as innocent sleepovers turned into secret glances and whispered conversations. I thought I was imagining it. Until I wasn't. This isn't just a story of betrayal, it's a story of being replaced. Watching love rot from the inside. And the painful strength it takes to choose yourself when the two people you trusted most turn against you. Part 1. When loyalty lives next door, 4030 characters. I always thought betrayal would come from outside. A stranger, a mistake, a flirty coworker, or a night of too many drinks. But I never imagined it would come from the person I used to share my secrets with, or from the man who promised me forever with a trembling voice and a ring in his pocket. My name is Claire. I'm 33, married to Jason for almost 8 years. We met in college, one of those whirlwind romances that made everyone around us roll their eyes and secretly root for us. He was the quiet one in our friend group, the guy who always brought a book to the party. I was the loud, awkward, opinionated girl who never stopped talking. Somehow, it worked. We balanced each other. We built a life, bought a small home, a dog, plans for kids, someday. And then came Mia. Mia was my best friend from childhood, practically my sister. We grew up together, shared bunk beds and birthdays. She knew every detail of my life, every secret, every heartbreak. We drifted in college. But when she came back into my life after a nasty breakup and eviction, I didn't hesitate. Of course you can stay with us, I told her, for as long as you need. She moved in with just 2 suitcases and a box of mismatched mugs. I cleared a space in the guest room and left a candle burning on the nightstand to make it feel like home. Jason was polite, as always, but a bit distant. I chalked it up to him not being great with new people. Only she wasn't new. I started noticing it the second week. The way they laughed at the same jokes. Like there was a language between them I didn't speak. How Jason began spending more time in the living room when Mia was watching TV. How his phone suddenly had a password. Small things. Nothing big enough to confront, not yet. Mia wore my hoodie one night, Jason's favorite. She said she grabbed it by accident. I told myself that was all it was. But doubt is like a leak in the ceiling. At first, it's just a dark spot, then a drip, and before you know it, the roof collapses. One night, Jason came home late, said he was working. I believed him. Until I saw Mia tiptoeing back to her room a few minutes after he walked in. Her hair was wet, and she was wearing the t-shirt I'd bought him for his birthday. My throat went dry. "Did you take a shower?" I asked her. She froze. "Yeah, couldn't sleep." But the look she gave me, that flicker of guilt and challenge, said more than her words ever could. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I checked the laundry basket. His t-shirt was inside it, soaked, still warm. I wanted to scream, to cry, to confront them both. But I did nothing. Instead, I made breakfast, scrambled eggs, toast. I smiled too hard, handed them plates, and watched them pretend we were still 3 people in a happy home. Something inside me broke that day, not from the betrayal, but from the performance. I realized they were already gone, and I was just the one too polite to walk away first. I needed proof, real proof, something undeniable, something that would force the truth into the light, no matter how much it burned. I was done guessing, done pretending. Because the thing about betrayal is, once you see it, you can't unsee it. Part 2, the things they thought I didn't see. 4080 characters. I became a quiet observer in my own home. Every glance, every whisper, every shared smile across the dinner table, I logged it like evidence in a private courtroom inside my head. Jason and Mia thought they were careful. Maybe they were, but not careful enough for someone who knew them both better than they knew themselves. The toothbrush in our shared bathroom had 2 new bristles bent sideways, just like mine. Only mine was still sitting in its holder. I found a strand of long, dark hair on Jason's sweater. Mia's hair. She didn't wear sweaters. Then there was the couch. One evening, I came home early from a work meeting, pretending I'd left something behind. I stepped in softly, heart thudding, and there they were, sitting too close. Not touching, but leaning in. The way people do when they're deep in a world they don't want anyone else in. She was laughing. He was staring at her lips. When they saw me, Jason jumped up too quickly, like he was guilty of something. Mia just smiled, wide-eyed and sweet, like she hadn't done anything wrong. That smile, it still haunts me. "Didn't hear you come in," Jason said. "Clearly," I replied. That night, I lay in bed beside him, staring at the ceiling, while he snored softly, unaware of the rage coiling beneath my skin. I realized I'd been replaced, not just physically, but emotionally. They were building something inside the ruins of my marriage, and I had been standing still, watching it happen. But I wasn't going to stand still anymore. The next morning, I called in sick to work. I needed answers, not guesses, not suspicions, but undeniable truth. I started with Mia's phone. She always left it charging in the kitchen while she showered. I waited for the water to turn on, then walked in barefoot and calm, like I was just getting a glass of juice. Her phone didn't have a passcode. I wish it had. The messages were there, hundreds of them, some sweet, some filthy, all full of the kind of intimacy I hadn't shared with Jason in months. My name came up more than once, in jokes, in pity, in annoyance. "She still doesn't suspect anything," Mia had written. "She's smarter than you think," Jason replied. "So what? It's not like she's gonna leave. She's too scared to be alone." That one burned the most. I took screenshots, sent them to my own phone. Then I went a step further. I logged into our shared family computer and pulled Jason's backup files from his cloud account. Videos, pictures, some of them from inside our home. The living room, the guest room. One, God help me, was from our bedroom. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just felt empty, like everything that made me me had been scooped out, and I was just this quiet, hollow shell walking through a life that wasn't mine anymore. That night, I set the table for 3, made spaghetti, Jason's favorite, poured wine for everyone. Mia looked nervous. Jason kept clearing his throat. I smiled the whole time. Every fork scrape and wine sip felt like a performance, and I was the star of a twisted little play they hadn't realized I was directing. "Everything okay?" Jason asked, his eyes searching mine. "Perfect," I said, tipping my glass. The next day, I made an appointment with a lawyer. But I wasn't done yet. I didn't want to just leave. I wanted them to know I knew. I wanted them to squirm. So I made a plan. It started with a group chat. I created it under the name Sunday Brunch, and added Jason and Mia. Then I uploaded the screenshots, the videos, everything. I didn't say a word, just hit send and waited. Less than a minute later, I heard the panicked footsteps. Jason stormed into the room, his face pale. Mia trailed behind him, her expression crumpling. "Claire, what is this?" I looked up from my coffee, cool as ever. "You tell me." And that was the first time I saw them both look afraid. But this story isn't over, not even close. Because just when I thought I had taken control, fate decided to take something from me that I would never get back. Part 3, When Silence Hurts Louder Than Screams. After I dropped the bomb into that chat, everything in our house cracked open. Jason tried to deny it first, said the texts were jokes, the videos taken out of context. Mia just cried, hands over her mouth like she was suddenly the victim. They both begged, not for forgiveness, but for secrecy. They wanted to keep their dirty little betrayal hidden, not out of shame, but because of how it might look. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't throw things. That would have given them power, made it about drama instead of destruction. I just stood there, collected and cold, watching them flail in the wreckage of their own deceit. "I'll be out by tomorrow," Mia whispered finally. "Please, Claire." I didn't mean for this to happen. I didn't respond. She wasn't worth words. Jason, on the other hand, followed me from room to room that evening, babbling about mistakes, loneliness, how he felt disconnected, and how it just happened. Like tripping into bed with my sister was some clumsy accident. "Claire, don't do this. Don't tear our family apart." I turned and looked him dead in the eyes. "You already did." He stopped talking after that. The next morning, I called my mother, told her everything. There was a long silence on the other end. Then, with a calm I hadn't expected, she said, "Come home." "I can't. Not yet." "Then let me come to you." No, Mom, I need to do this on my own. What I didn't tell her, what I hadn't told anyone, was that I was pregnant. 8 weeks. I had taken the test right before everything exploded. I hadn't even told Jason yet. I'd planned a surprise. A note in a book he was reading. A tiny pair of socks wrapped in tissue paper. I thought it would bring us back together. But now? Now I held my stomach differently. Protective. Afraid. I didn't know what kind of life I was walking into, but I knew it would be just me and the baby from now on. I started packing that day, room by room, memories I couldn't take with me. I boxed up and shoved into the garage. Let them keep the furniture, the matching curtains, the fake smiles in photo frames. But not the house. I owned the house. My name was on the deed. It was the one smart thing I had done when we first got married. Insisted on keeping my grandmother's inheritance separate. Now it was my leverage. I met with the lawyer again, this time with a folder full of evidence. He read through it, eyebrows rising higher with every screenshot. You want to file for divorce immediately? Yes. And the house? I want to sell it. They can figure out where they're going, together. He nodded slowly. You're surprisingly composed. I don't have time to fall apart, I said. Not anymore. But the cracks were forming. I could feel them late at night, in the silence, in the echo of the ticking clock in the living room. I'd sit there on the edge of the couch, hands on my belly, listening to the emptiness, mourning the life I thought I had. Then came the final blow. 1 week later, as I walked into my OBGYN's office for my first real ultrasound, I already had a name in mind, already imagined the nursery, already knew I would love that baby more fiercely than I had ever loved anyone. The doctor's face shifted halfway through the scan. She frowned, gently tilted the monitor. Let me check something again, she said quietly. Minutes stretched. Cold gel stuck to my skin. I stared at the ceiling tiles and counted each breath. Then she placed a hand on my wrist. I'm so sorry, there's no heartbeat. Everything went still. My mouth opened, but no sound came. My eyes stayed dry, like my body was too shocked to grieve yet. I left the clinic on autopilot, walking past smiling women with round bellies and glowing partners by their sides. I sat in my car for an hour. No music, no tears, just silence. I had lost everything. My husband, my sister, my child. There was nothing left to fight for. Or so I thought. But pain has a strange way of clearing the fog, and in that clarity, I saw a path forward, not for revenge anymore, not even for closure, but for rebirth. I was going to rebuild, on my own terms. Even if it meant starting from ashes. Part 4, Ashes don't whisper, they roar. I didn't go home after the hospital. I drove. Past the city. Past the streets I used to know blindfolded. Past the turn that would take me back to the house where Jason and Mia now played house like nothing had happened. I found myself at a roadside motel 2 hours out of town, the kind with flickering neon signs and scratchy bed sheets. I didn't care. I just needed to disappear from the lies, the pity, the expectations. I lay there in a stiff, cold bed that night, staring at the stained ceiling fan, feeling a strange calm settle over me. A numbness that wasn't just grief, it was something deeper. Like my soul had folded itself inward, trying to protect what little was left. But numbness doesn't last forever. The pain returned like a wave the next morning. Stronger. Deeper. More personal. I checked my phone for the first time in 2 days. 3 missed calls from Jason. 1 message from Mia, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen. Please talk to me. And dozens of messages from mutual friends and family, all asking questions, pretending to care, some clearly just fishing for gossip. I ignored them all. I checked my email next. There was a note from the real estate agent. Offer came in on the house. Above asking price. Thought you'd want to know. I replied with a single word, except. That house was cursed now. Filled with echoes of betrayal and broken dreams. I didn't want a single piece of it following me into the next chapter. And yet, some wounds bleed no matter how far you run. Later that week, back in the city for a scheduled follow-up, I made the mistake of driving past the old neighborhood. Just once. I told myself I was over it. Just curious. Just closure. But when I turned the corner onto our street, I saw something that stopped me cold. They were on the porch. Jason and Mia. Laughing. She was wearing one of my old sweatshirts, the gray one with the faded blue letters from our college days. He had his arm around her waist. She leaned into him like it was always supposed to be that way. Like I had never existed. It wasn't rage that hit me. It was erasure. They had rewritten the story. Cut me out of the picture. Started their new chapter like I'd been nothing more than a rough draft. I didn't stop. Didn't roll down the window. Just kept driving, tears blurring the road ahead. But something shifted inside me that day. I realized they could take the house. The marriage. The illusion of family. But they couldn't take my story. That was mine to tell. Mine to own. I checked into a small apartment near the lake that afternoon, 1 bedroom, barely furnished, but quiet. Peaceful. I brought only the essentials. Left the rest in storage. Then I pulled out my laptop. And I began to write. Not a memoir. Not yet. Just thoughts. Pieces. Broken sentences that mirrored my broken spirit. But the more I typed, the more the pain flowed out of me and onto the page. Every betrayal. Every silent scream. Every dream that had died. And slowly, I began to breathe again. I volunteered at a local shelter twice a week, helping women who had seen too much darkness. I joined a grief group, though I rarely spoke. I just listened. Their pain mirrored mine in ways that made me feel less alone. And one rainy evening, while walking home from the corner cafe, I bumped into someone. Literally. Coffee splashed. Apologies were exchanged. His name was Elijah. Tall, soft-spoken, with the kind of eyes that had seen storms but still looked for stars. We talked for 5 minutes. Then 30. Then hours. I didn't fall in love. Not yet. But for the first time in months, I laughed. Really laughed. And it felt like reclaiming a part of myself I thought had died. Still, the ghosts didn't disappear. Late at night, I'd wake up reaching for a baby that wasn't there. I'd dream of Jason's voice, of Mia's laughter echoing down hallways I no longer lived in. But each morning, I got up anyway. Made my coffee. Fed the stray cat that had adopted my windowsill. Opened my laptop. And wrote. Not because I was healed. But because I was trying. Part 5, The Things That Never Leave. I once read that grief has no expiration date, that it simply changes form. It stops screaming and starts whispering. Sometimes it hums low in the background, like a sad song you can't quite turn off. Other times, it ambushes you in the middle of a good day, wrapping its cold fingers around your ribs until you can't breathe. That's how it felt, 6 months later, sitting at a lakeside cafe with Elijah. The sky was soft gray, the kind that made you think the world was pausing to exhale. Elijah was telling me about his brother's kid, some adorable story involving a frog, a backpack, and a school fire alarm. I was laughing, actually laughing. And then a woman passed by. She had a baby in a sling. A tiny thing, wrapped in a yellow blanket with sunflowers. I froze. Elijah noticed. He didn't ask. He just gently placed his hand over mine. Warm, still, understanding. I hadn't told him everything. Not yet. He knew my marriage ended badly. He knew there'd been betrayal. He knew I'd lost something, someone, but I hadn't spoken her name. I couldn't. Not yet. But that moment, watching that child bounce softly on her mother's chest, so unaware of the storms people survive just to wake up in the morning, something cracked open inside me. Later that night, I pulled out the memory box I swore I wouldn't open again. Inside, a single ultrasound photo, faded slightly at the edges, the tiny curve of a spine, a heartbeat I once heard echo through a cold examination room. I placed the photo on my desk. I whispered her name for the first time in months. Layla. My daughter. My almost. The ache that followed was sharp, but it was clean, like lancing a wound that had festered too long. I let the tears fall, unfiltered, unhidden. I wasn't crying because I was broken. I was crying because I remembered her, and I wouldn't let her memory be tied to pain forever. That night, I wrote her a letter. I told her about the books I would have read her, the lullabies I would have sung, the stories I would have made up on rainy afternoons. I told her about the father she'd never meet, and the lessons I'd learned the hard way. I told her I loved her. I told her I was sorry. I told her goodbye. It wasn't closure. I don't think that exists for this kind of grief, but it was a beginning. A soft one. In the months that followed, things changed slowly, unevenly, but beautifully. I self-published a collection of essays titled The Quiet After. Nothing flashy, just raw, honest fragments of pain and healing. Somehow, it found its way to readers. Emails started coming in. Messages from strangers who had felt the same betrayal, the same loss. People who said my words made them feel seen. That's when I realized, maybe surviving wasn't the final chapter. Maybe sharing was. Elijah became my anchor. He never pushed, never tried to fix me. He just stayed. Consistent, quietly loving. He brought flowers on the days I couldn't get out of bed. He made bad coffee taste good just by sitting across the table. One night, curled up on the couch, he asked, "Do you think you'll ever want to try again?" I knew what he meant. Not just love. A family. I didn't answer right away. I just leaned into him and whispered, "Maybe." And for the first time, maybe felt like a miracle. But life isn't a straight road. Healing doesn't erase history. One spring afternoon, as the sun warmed the windows of my apartment, there was a knock at the door. I opened it and froze. Jason stood there. Older, tired, holding a bouquet of peonies, my favorite. "I shouldn't be here," he started, voice low. I had to see you, to say I'm sorry, for everything." I didn't speak. Not for a long moment. He looked down at the flowers, then back at me. "Mia left 3 months ago. Said she couldn't deal with the guilt anymore. Said I was still in love with you. Maybe she was right." His words landed like small stones, not heavy, but not light either. "I don't want anything from you," he said quickly, "just. I think about her every day. Layla, I know I don't have the right, but I do." The name, her name, on his lips. For a second, the earth tilted. But then I nodded. "I think about her too," I said. And that was it. Not a reunion. Not forgiveness. Just truth, standing quietly in the doorway. He left the flowers. I didn't bring them inside. I watched him walk away, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like chasing closure. Because I already had it. I had rebuilt a life. Not perfect. Not easy. But mine. And sometimes, that's more than enough. Part 6, The Ghost in the Hallway. Grief doesn't knock when it comes back. It just walks in, sits beside you on the couch, and acts like it never left. That's how it felt when I passed a store window and caught the faintest reflection of a woman pushing a stroller. She didn't look like me, not in clothes, not in posture, but in that split second, I thought, what if I had been her? What if my path had bent just slightly differently? Would I be walking these same streets with a little girl in my arms? Would I be the one singing lullabies at bedtime? These weren't just hypotheticals anymore. They were ghosts I carried. Back home, Elijah noticed the silence in me before I did. "You okay?" he asked from the kitchen, stirring sauce, his sleeves rolled up, his hair slightly messy in that way I had grown to love. "I'm fine," I said. He walked over and pressed his forehead to mine. "Try again." I smiled, but it was a tired one. "There's a version of me that never got to exist," I whispered, "and sometimes I miss her." Elijah nodded. He didn't rush to comfort, didn't spout silver linings, he just held me. And sometimes, that's all I needed. We moved in together in early spring. It wasn't dramatic, no big moment or grand gesture, just a quiet decision over takeout containers and half-watched reruns. "I've got 2 toothbrushes at your place, and you have 1 drawer here," Elijah had said. "Should we stop pretending we're guests?" I laughed. "Yeah, let's stop pretending." His apartment was small, cozy, filled with books and plants and that weird smell of coffee and old wood. My clothes mingled with his, my past curled up against his future. Slowly, it began to feel like home. But healing isn't linear, it dips, crashes, rebuilds. Sometimes, I still woke up at 3 a.m. from dreams where Lila cried and I couldn't reach her, where Jason stood in the doorway, saying nothing, his face soaked in shadows. And then there were days like the one I found the journal. It had been buried deep in one of the moving boxes I never unpacked, a leather-bound notebook I'd kept during the early weeks of my pregnancy. Inside, raw thoughts, letters to my future child, fears I never voiced aloud, hopes I buried the moment I saw that flat line on the hospital monitor. I sat on the floor and read every word. I cried so hard I thought my lungs would give out. But I didn't hide the journal again. I left it on my nightstand. A reminder of the woman I'd been, the girl who believed, the mother who almost was. Elijah found it one morning. He didn't say anything, just held it like something sacred. She was real, I said softly, even if no one else remembers her. She mattered. She still does, he said, to me, because she was yours. That was the first night we lit a candle for her. A small one, in a glass jar with lavender scent. We didn't say much. We just let it burn. Summer came quietly. With it, laughter, peace, morning walks and late-night kisses. Slowly, the sharp edges of my past softened. One Sunday, while walking through a quiet park, Elijah turned to me with that look he always had when he was about to say something serious. "I don't want to pressure you," he said, "but if someday you wanted to try again, to be a mom, I'd want that. With you." The words landed like feathers, not stones. Soft. Full of possibility. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I watched a child run across the field, chasing bubbles, her laugh echoing through the trees. And I let myself imagine it, just for a second. Not as a replacement. Not to erase. But as something new. "Maybe," I said, smiling, "someday." That night, I wrote Lila another letter. I told her about Elijah. I told her that I still carried her in everything I did. And I told her, for the first time, that I was learning to be okay again. There's a kind of bravery in waking up every day after your world ends. Not everyone sees it. But I feel it now, in my bones, in my breath, in the way I look at the sky and say thank you without even thinking. Lila may never walk this earth, but she changed the woman I became. And Elijah, he didn't save me. He waited while I learned how to save myself. And somehow, that's even more beautiful. Part 7, a different kind of forever. Autumn arrived in golden silence. The wind carried a kind of wisdom, a hush that asked nothing but presence. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like I could breathe without guilt pressing on my lungs. Elijah and I had created a rhythm of quiet breakfasts, walks in the late afternoon, messy dinners that ended in flower fights and laughter. We weren't perfect, but we were real. And that was enough. Then came the letter. It arrived on a Monday, nestled between bills and junk mail. I almost didn't open it. The handwriting was unfamiliar and neat, slanted, but shaking slightly as if written by an unsure hand. Inside, one page. Just one. "Anna. I heard what happened. Not from Jason, he won't even look at me anymore. But from his mother, and from the silence between us. I didn't know about the baby. I didn't know what I was doing would take that from you. I don't expect you to forgive me. But I needed to say it, I'm sorry. I will carry this forever. Claire. Claire. The woman Jason left me for. The woman I never got to face, never got to scream at or cry in front of." My hands trembled as I read it. Not because I hated her, but because part of me had finally stopped needing anything from her. Not closure. Not revenge. Not even understanding. I folded the letter and burned it in the sink. I watched the paper curl and disintegrate into black flakes. And I whispered, "I forgive you." Not for her. For me. A year passed. The first anniversary of Lila's due date came with rain. Elijah and I lit a candle again. I baked a tiny vanilla cake, the kind I imagined I would have made for her first birthday. We sang nothing. We said everything in silence. Grief didn't leave. It just learned to sit beside joy, quieter now, less demanding. Some days I still woke up with her name in my throat. But more and more, I also woke up with peace. And then came the doctor's appointment. Not a planned one. I'd been feeling tired. Dizzy. I'd dismissed it as stress, or maybe just the changing seasons. But when the doctor looked at me with cautious joy, I knew before she said anything. "Anna," she smiled gently. "You're pregnant." The world didn't spin this time. It stilled. I sat there in stunned silence as her words filled the room. My hand instinctively went to my stomach. My heart raced with fear, love, memory. Later, in the car, I didn't call Elijah right away. I drove to the lake instead, the one where he first kissed me, where the wind carried the scent of pine and hope. I sat on a bench and cried. Not because I was scared, but because I knew this time, I was ready. Elijah held the test in his hand, stunned. "You're sure?" he asked, eyes wide. I nodded. He didn't say anything at first. Just knelt in front of me and wrapped his arms around my waist, his face buried against me. "Whatever happens," he whispered, "we do it together." And that was enough. No grand declarations. No overpromises. Just presence. Just love. 9 months later, we welcomed a son. He had my eyes and Elijah's laugh, and something else too, something hard to name but easy to feel. I held him and whispered, "You have a sister." And somehow, I swear, he smiled in his sleep. We moved into a new house. One with creaky stairs and a backyard full of dandelions. We painted the nursery in soft blues and grays, but on the top shelf sat a single lavender candle. Every year on the same day, we light it. We tell our son about the sister he'll never meet. And one day, when he's older, I'll tell him the full story of his mother's heartbreak, of the strength that came from ruin, of how love can be reborn when you think it's gone forever. Because that's the thing about life. It doesn't always go the way you plan. But sometimes, the version you never expected turns out to be the one that saves you. And me? I'm not who I was. But I've found something deeper than happiness. I've found peace.